Support for WPR comes from 4imprint, providers of promotional products for businesses, including embroidered apparel, trade show items, and logoed business gifts. More is at 4imprint.com. 4imprint, for certain.
Great to have you with us on WPR News. Larry Mealer here, talking today about state parks, forest, and recreation areas in Wisconsin. A series of conversations we're having to celebrate the 125th anniversary year of our Wisconsin State Park System. With us, Jim Buchholz, retired state park supervisor for the Wisconsin DNR. He's the author of the book, a great book, Wisconsin State Parks, Forests and Recreation Areas, a Ranger's Guide. Jim, welcome back. Good to have you with us. What's in this book?
Well, it's a book that includes all the state parks, forests, and the recreation area, and there's 80 of them, so there's 80 chapters, and each one features one of those properties. Each one has color photographs, which I took as well, and it talks about the hiking, biking trails, campgrounds, interpretive trails, swimming beaches, boating, and just about everything you can do at a state park, and also some of the things nearby that you might want to go and see while you're in the area. And then I also include some ranger tips, I call them, and I like to sneak in some trivia here and there, that just interesting things that I found out that I didn't know about either of the park or the local area.
Well, I tell you what, it's practically 500 pages, and I like the size of it too. It's 6 by 8 or thereabouts, and
Right.
And so it's a handy book, and it's packed with great information about our parks. You know, one of the things that I enjoyed about the book is you got a nice little history of the park system to begin the book. Maybe give us the thumbnail version of that history.
Yeah, actually, it started. Some you may know that it's the 125th anniversary of the state park system, and that's something that the Bureau of Parks and Recreation are going to be pushing forward with this year, 125 years. But actually, the park system almost got started about 20 years before that, in 1899. The legislators were going to establish a state park, and it didn't quite work.
Where was that? Was that Vilas County?
Yeah, it was going to be Vilas County. It was going to be 760 square miles, which should make it the size of the Smoky Mountains National Park if it would have worked. But unfortunately, the state only owned about 50,000 acres back in those days. And then right after that, the lumber companies pretty much purchased all the forest land in the Northwoods, including, as it turns out, the land that the state already owned. So it didn't quite get off.
But our first one was interstate.
Right, interstate. And finally, in 1899, the legislature tried again, and this time they were okay. They 20 years later, they finally established Interstate State Park, and so that is our number one actual park, which was developed even before there was anything in the government to maintain them, which is kind of interesting. It took us another 10, 12 years to do that. But if your listeners don't know where Interstate is, it's in northwestern Wisconsin in Polk County. It's just like northeast of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And it's a beautiful pick. I mean, you couldn't go for a better first park than that. It's right on the St. Croix River, which is now part of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. And it's not real big. It's about 1,300 acres, but it has a beautiful campground and really is known for the beautiful 200-foot rock bluffs right along the river area.
By the way, Jim, we didn't mention this, but you kind of got the state sectioned off into 3 areas. And what I like about it, you can look in the areas, and then you can go to the chapters, and you've got the table of contents is organized by those various regions 1, 2, and 3, which you can look at on the handy map. and then go down the list, and there's so many new and I tell you, I love the way you've got that organized, Jim, with the regions, and then the chapters kind of corresponding to those regions, and it really makes it handy if if you want to visit state parks in the state or the other areas, the forests or the recreation areas. Man, this is it's easy to look at and to do. I learned, even though I've been to many of these parks and areas, I've learned a lot myself. And also with us, Jim Carter. Jim's the DNR property supervisor for Devil's Lake State Park and Natural Bridge State Park. Jim, great to have you with us as well.
Hello, Larry. Thanks for having me.
We're going to focus on Region 2, which is in the southwest portion of the state. What stands out to you about the parks in that area of our state?
Well, Region 2 in my book is the southernmost part, southwestern part of the state, and it's got the most state parks of all the regions that I covered. There's over 30 state parks and forests in that particular area, and so many of them are clustered right around Madison. So people in Madison, certainly in that area, have a lot to choose from, that's for sure, not to mention Devil's Lake, where Jim's going to be talking about in a little while, the Governor Dodge State Park, Wyalusing State Park way along the Mississippi River, and so many more, including Yellowstone, which we'll talk about later as well.
And I've made a lot of trips to Devil's Lake State Park. Jim Carter, you've been there since 2020. I think you served as DNR supervisor for Devil's Lake State Park. And it's our most visited state park, is it not?
It is. It's the largest state park in Wisconsin, and it's also the busiest. Yes, we see about 2.4 million visitors annually at this park. So,
yeah. So, and I've been there many times and stayed there many times. What is it, in your mind, what is it that attracts so many people to Devil's Lake?
I think, one thing that we're pretty rich in here is unique geology. 500-foot bluffs rising above this 360-acre clear blue lake. I think there's nothing that attracts people like water, and then to have those rock formations towering above the lake and sandy beaches on both the north and the south shore. It's a very popular place to picnic and bring your friends and family.
It was interesting to me the sort of the history, the natural history, and how that lake was formed.
Yeah, this is some of the oldest rock in the state. The geology here, like I said, is quite rich. The quartzite rock, was loose sand that was compressed over millions of years to give us these rock formations, and then the glaciers which came along and blocked up the two ends, and then receded and closed off this water body that we have here.
Yeah, it's really cool. Jim Buchholz, you once had Jim Carter's job at Devil's Lake. How does the park today compare to the park during your time working there?
The nice part is you go back and it's just like coming home to me. A lot of the parks are that way, but to see the lake and to see the towering bluffs, as Jim mentioned, it's just fantastic to go back there. And even though it's the busiest park in the state, you go on most of these trails, and yeah, it can be busy at times, but there's so many places that you can go to have the whole. It seems like you have the whole park to yourself. So that hasn't changed really. So.
There are effigy burial mounds within the park, and certainly evidence that Native American peoples live there. How far back and maybe I don't know, Jim Carter, maybe you can talk about this, a little of the history of the Native American peoples who live there.
Well, I can touch on it just briefly. Some of the first people at the lake probably date back more than 10,000 years. So besides even the the First Nations that were around this area, the mound builders that built those mounds, date back, that long ago. And most of that evidence is on the North Shore. There's a cluster of mounds, some in the shape of animals and some in linear mounds and conical mounds. But most of those sites, are throughout our North Shore picnic area, and then probably the largest one is down on the South Shore, and that's what's referred to as the Bird Mound down there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's great to see. And European immigrants, I think, established the city of Baraboo, or the community of Baraboo, back in the 1850s.
Yeah, and what really brought tourism to this area was the railroad. So hotels and the railroad between the 1860s and 70s really drove, the population and the interest in this property.
Yeah, I would think so. I bet a lot of people traveled there by train. And in the 1930s, thereabouts, the Civilian Conservation Corps had a camp at Devil's Lake. What did the Corps build at the park?
So the Corps built many of the stone buildings that you see today. So the park headquarters were my offices, some of our shower buildings that are still in use today in the Northern Lights campground. Those buildings are still used and were built back in the 30s by the CCC. That camp was actually down where our group camp is on the South Shore, off of the South Shore actually to the east towards 113. And to have that amount of history along with our geology, it's fascinating to be able to come here and see that.
Well, I was going to add earlier, even before the park was there, Devil's Lake, has always been a popular place. The resorts that were built there, we had national celebrities. Ulysses S. Grant was there. Mary Todd Lincoln was there. Just had a steamboat on the lake for the tourists. So it would have been interesting to see what that looked like back in those days.
It would have indeed. Oh, man. And Jim Buckles, which trail at Devil's Lake is your favorite? Do you have one?
Oh, I do. Yeah, the East Bluff Trail, it's called. You start on the north end of the park, and the East Bluff Trail starts there. And it's a pretty, I wouldn't say it's an easy route, but it's not that bad. You go up and you go past different rock formations. There's Elephant Rock and Elephant Cave, and it leads to the iconic scene that you see in magazines and calendars. Devil's Doorway is the most iconic and photographed rock probably in the Midwest, I bet. Yeah. But that place, you can get to that. And then on the way down, you can either go back down the way you came, or if you want to walk a little further, you can loop around the lake, which I like to do. And that's about 4.7 closer to 5 miles, I guess it is, around the lake. So if you want to walk that far and take your time doing it, you can go down the Balanced Rock Trail or the Pothole Trail, all of which were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps, which we just talked about. And they're still there, and they're still maintained. And I know Jim has crews that go up there and maintain those, and sometimes there's a washout or a fallout, but go all the way down to the South Shore and then around and come back either on the West Bluff, or you can take the Tumble Rocks Trail, which goes right along the shoreline, which is a real easy route as well. So that would be my suggestion if people have time to walk it. That's I think one of the best trails in the park.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And there are some other sites in the area that's certainly worth visiting. Parfrey's Glen State Natural Area, that is not a very long hike, but it is a beautiful hike, Jim Buckles.
Oh, it certainly is. Yeah, I would often recommend that to people. It's not that hard of a trail. It's a short interpretive trail. It's actually it's off a county DL. I guess, which stands for Devil's Lake. I'm not sure. About 2 miles east of Highway 113, and it's a separate area, has a separate parking area, and you follow a really beautiful cold running stream through, and it goes through a deep gorge that's lined with towering sandstone walls, and they're all embedded with quartzite stones, and it's kind of a magical place. I think if you have a chance to go and see it, I definitely would recommend anybody go.
Yeah,
See it.
nice place to visit on, especially on a hot day. It's usually
Definitely.
cool in there.
It is, yeah.
And then, of course, Circus World in a museum in Baraboo is nearby as well, and that's always a fun visit. David called, couldn't stay with us, wanted to know what state park programs exist for visitors who are disabled vets.
Pretty much every state park has got accessible trails. I think of the most outstanding has to be the accessible lookout tower at Peninsula State Park, which was, I think, a $2.some million structure with a ramp that goes all the way to the top of a lookout tower as being the best. But even at Devil's Lake, there's several places that are accommodating for people who have any kind of impairment, including disabled. Most of the parks have special campsites with electricity and set up for people in wheelchairs, for example. Most parks have accessible trails that they can go on.
How difficult is it to book a campsite at the park?
For Devil's Lake, it's rather difficult, depending on, especially if you're looking for the summer for our prime rates, or weekends for that matter. So we have 11-month advance window, and I encourage everyone to book early as soon as they know they want to make their plans.
And speaking of off-beat, we're going to talk about Natural Bridge State Park, which is less traveled, I think, certainly less traveled than Devil's Lake State Park. We'll talk about that in just a second. Jim Buchholz, our guest, one of our guests today, he's written Wisconsin State Parks, Forest, and Recreation Areas, a Ranger's Guide. And Jim Carter, of course, is the manager of the property at Devil's Lake State Park and also Natural Bridge State Park. I'm Larry Mueller for WPR News. Talking about our wonderful state parks here in Wisconsin, celebrating 125th anniversary this year. Jim Buchholz, one of our guests, has written this wonderful guide to Wisconsin state parks, a Ranger's Guide, and includes all of the 80 parks in our state. And we're zeroing in, he has 3 regions in his book, and we're zeroing in on south central and southwestern Wisconsin. Jim Buchholz, you want to address maintenance for our parks?
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, I give credit to Jim Carter and all the managers that work with Steve Schmelzer, who's the director of the state parks, and it's amazing what they can do given the reductions that they've had over the years, not only in personnel but budgets as well. So, and I agree, there's some places that really could use some help, and Tower Hill is one that I think could use some work. What's really great is having the friends groups of all these properties come in and help with the maintenance. That's just outstanding. So I don't know what the total is, but it's tens of thousands, I know, of hours of people coming in to help maintain the buildings. And many of them are retired people like me, want to help out in the park and do that. So I encourage people who are interested in Tower Hill especially, or any other park, to come in and help. And there's plenty to do, and they're welcoming the help doing that. But I think Steve Schmelzer, I remember he was quoted in some article a while back that the maintenance projects that are on hand right now. These are projects of things that need to be done, need to be fixed. It's now over $1 billion, not million, $1 billion. That's how far behind state parks are. So, yeah, we definitely need some help with a lot of things, but they're doing what they can with the resources that they have. That's the best I can come up with, I guess.
Yeah, Jim Carter, I want to turn to Natural Bridge State Park, which I haven't visited. It's one of the 10 in this region that I haven't visited. Tell us about that park, which far fewer people actually visit.
Yeah, so one of the unique features there is where it gets its name is the actual sandstone arch or the bridge. And unlike the rock here, that's a sandstone structure. It was created from wind and water erosion rather than the glacier, so it's just at the edge of the driftless area. So where the glaciers came through here by Devil's Lake and just kind of stopped and formed the lake, they didn't actually destroy the bridge over there. And that bridge structure, we have some archaeologists from back in the day that actually did some excavations, and they figure that from carbon dating that Native American people at the time go back about 11 years. They were using that bridge, and then there's almost like a shelter, like a somewhat of a cave.
About 11,000. About 11,000 years, you mean, not 11.
Yes, I'm sorry, 11,000 years. Yep.
So it traces back, and Jim Buckles, you got a nice photo of it in the book, that bridge.
Yeah, that came into being in 1973. And I started at Devil's Lake a few years later, so we didn't have enough rangers to really check that area out because it's about 20 miles away. I think it's about 20, if I recall right, Jim, from the Devil's Lake. So I would have to go out there about once a week during the summer just to make sure things were okay. And we had a local guy that kind of looked after it. But the really interesting thing, I think, not only the stone, natural stone arch, which is extremely rare in Wisconsin, very, very rare. And it's certainly the largest one that we have. But the excavation that they did there, and then as Jim had mentioned, 11,000 years ago, there were people there hunting. The excavation, they came up with clamshells and some 50 different animal species. And I kind of go through that in the book, but there were turkey, elk, wolf, bobcat, even mountain lions and passenger pigeon. All that has been identified there. But the neat thing to me is that they were using that overhang or that cave as a shelter at the same time that there were still glaciers over most of Wisconsin. As Jim mentioned, the glacier stopped and was stopped right at the Devil's Lake area. So this area was in the driftless area. So it was never crushed by the glacier. But to imagine that there were people here hunting all these animals and birds were here at the same time we had glaciers in Wisconsin, it kind of blows your mind when you think about it.
Yeah, it does indeed. Well, Jim Carter, how do you divide your time between Devil's Lake and Natural Bridge State Parks?
But we have to be strategic and prioritize, where we spend that time. And unfortunately, Natural Bridge doesn't get as much time as a larger, busier property like Devil's Lake. But it's always something where we're working on that as best we can.
Yeah. Jim Carter, you probably have pretty good idea of how your park, with as many visitors as you have, probably do pretty well. Do you get to use all that money, or does it get spread out among other parks as well?
So yeah, we do bring in a lot of revenue, but as Jim writes in his book, it's a system of state parks, so that money is actually divided across the system. So even though we may generate millions of dollars here at Devil's Lake, that money is spread out across the system of state parks. And here at Devil's Lake, we have two very active and strong partner groups. One is the Friends of Devil's Lake State Park, who do a lot of volunteering work and fundraising for us, and then they also can apply for grants. And then it's also the Devil's Lake Concession Corporation, which runs our concessions programs here. They're a nonprofit, and anything that they profit from, it gets turned back into the park here. So.
We'll switch gears a little bit here. In the chapter about Wyalusing State Park, Jim Buchholz, you wrote about Treasure Cave. Supposedly, the crew of a boat of French fur traders went ashore and hid gold coins in the cave to prevent their theft by Sauk warriors. It's said that a rock slide blocked the entrance and the treasure is still buried there. This is in an email. Is there any truth to this story?
Well, that's the legend, and that's how it's been written down. And I'm still looking for it myself. So I was the manager there from '83 to '86, so I had a chance to explore a lot of that area, and I can tell you I never found it. But it's a great story, and it may or may not be true, like a lot of legends are, but that's how it got its name. So they say when it comes to legends, there's always a little hint of truth to it.
And joining us now, along with Jim Buchholz, is Mike Degenhardt. Mike is DNR Property Supervisor for Yellowstone Lake State Park, Belmont Mound State Park, and Caddis Springs State Recreation Area. Mike's great to have you with us. Thanks for coming to the studio. Appreciate it. Let's talk about Yellowstone Lake State Park. This park, including the lake, were intentionally built, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, the lake was built in 1954. Planning for that started a few years earlier. It's kind of a neat history because working there, you have a lot of local families that'll come and tell you that my grandpa had this portion of farm field over here, which is kind of neat with the history of building of the dam. And then it was 1970 before it officially became a state park. Had a campground before that and was ran by the state prior to that, but officially in 1970.
Tell us a bit more about the park itself.
Oh, the park has the main feature of the lake is over 450 acres. It's kind of an interesting lake because it has so many different draws for so many different visitors. Yeah. It's one of the only lakes in the area that has motorized boat traffic on it. A lot of southern Wisconsin doesn't have that. So people travel there for water recreation, mainly weekend use of tubers and skiers, jet skiers a little bit. And we also have quite a few people going there for fishing. And it's an interesting fishing lake because it has a little bit of everything. And I'll have visitors tell me that they like to come there to go bass fishing. But I'll also have the next visitor in will be, this is my favorite place to panfish. And then in the fall, we'll get muskie fishermen in there. The lake also has, the non-motorized sports that go on. Friends groups is just finishing up a project on a kayak launch on the west end, where a lot of people like to kayak canoe from and head up the river.
Yeah, it's a really neat place. And I was thinking, I caught a lot of panfish and some northern, and there were a few northern at least in there, if I'm not mistaken. I tried muskies. I didn't have any luck with muskie, but I caught an awful lot of panfish with the kids. Mm-hmm. There's some trails, hiking trails, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we have 8 miles of trails. And they kind of vary in terrain. We have the Oak Grove Trail, which is probably one of my favorite trails. Kind of does the rolling hills of the Driftless area, up through some nice oak forests, through a ravine. It's really a nice trail. On cooler, not sunny days, I like the Prairie Trail and the Prairie Savannah Trail, which has a lot of prairie area around it, about 180 acres of prairie. that's mainly maintained by volunteers and volunteer work, with some help from the state natural area people too. But we have some really dedicated prairie enthusiast members that work there and just make that trail beautiful with the flowers. One of the trails that's probably highly used is we have 4,000 acres of wildlife area around the property. And one of the trails by our office, the Wildlife Loop, is a highly used trail. We kind of cooperatively, we maintain the trail for people. It's a level trail. Starts out by the office, kind of goes on, it's on a earthen dam that was a retaining pond for fisheries in the early history. So in the spring, when you go out walking around that, you see a lot of ducks, geese that are nesting will kind of harass you. The far corner, when you just get to the river and the lake where they meet, across the river's an eagle nest. That's a popular place to watch. The trail loops around and comes back to the office through some wetland area of, the southern Wisconsin wetland. With there's a disabled an accessibility duck blind there for people that have accessibility needs, which is in kind of rough shapes, but it's in the works to have a project done to make that trail into a universal trail and upgrade that duck blind. So it's one of those things that's years out, but the trail's so loved that I'm really excited about that.
How many people visit Yellowstone Lake State Park in the course of a year?
Typically, we'll have just over 250,000 visitors a year.
Pretty good number.
Pretty popular fishing, boating in the weekends.
Do you draw people from, I'm sure you draw a lot of people from that part of the state, but probably come from a lot of different places.
Yes, they come from all over. A lot of visitors from out of state come to that property. We're close to the Illinois border, so we have a lot of visitors from Illinois. Iowa is not too far away, so.
Yeah, it's located near Blanchardville, the park itself is. So that to give you kind of an idea of where it is in the state, and I'd say 40 miles from Madison or so.
Yeah, about 40 miles from Madison, about a half hour from Platteville.
But another one of the parks that Mike's in charge of, Caddis Springs State Recreation Area, and it's your responsibility, Mike, to sort of oversee that area. Describe it for us.
That is one of the, a smaller park in the system, which is interesting because I find that like the small parks are really fun to go to. If you talk to some of the visitors there, it won't take long to meet one of the locals that are in love with the area. That park, that rec area has 2 lakes on it, Beckman Lake and Sander. They're divided by earthen dam with a paved trail on it. There's a trail all the way around the lake. The lake is probably best known for its pan fishing, but it is a really good lake to take a kayak or a canoe out on. It's smaller, it's quiet. There's a lot of waterfall to see.
You're not going to be water skiing on that one.
Nope, it's non-wake.
Non-waker.
Yep.
So there are, and there's a recreation area, and there's a state park. What differentiates a recreation area from a state park?
There's a little bit of difference even amongst the recreation areas, but Cadiz is open to hunting, so it'd be just your normal hunting regulations for that. So that's kind of a mutual use property. There is some area that's closed around the day use portion of it. And all this information will be shown on our website, too, when you look it up on the hunting maps for our properties.
A listener emailed to ask, who do we contact to lobby for more state park funding? And Jim, I'll turn it to you for that.
Well, like most everything, you have to get a hold of your state representatives and your state senators, and they're the ones that put together the budgets. So funding for state parks is certainly one that deserves to be on the top of the list of the things that should be done, need to be done. And so supportive. It doesn't matter, if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. I mean, everybody enjoys the state parks and want to see them continue to be improved and certainly be funded so people can continue to enjoy them, because it's the one, really, it's the treasure of Wisconsin. It always has been, and we've got to maintain it, and we've got to keep it available for people. So, yeah, let your representative know that you care about it and you want that to be funded.
Yeah, if you have a legislator, I mean, there's 80 state parks. If there's got to be legislators all over this, and there are legislators all over the state who have a state park in their area. And so I think it's a good idea to contact if you're interested in getting lobbying for more funding. Mike, I appreciate you driving over for this. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Great to have you with us on WPR News. Larry Mealer here, talking about state parks, forest, and recreation areas in northern Wisconsin. A couple of guests for you. Jim Buchholz, he's the author of the book, a great book, Wisconsin State Parks, Forests, and Recreation Areas, a Ranger's Guide. Also with us today, Matthew Densau. Matthew is a DNR property manager for Interstate State Park, Straight Line State Park, or Straight Lake State Park, and Governor Knowles State Forest. As I looked, this region 3 in the book, basically it goes from all the way from north from Superior, kind of down to Eau Claire, then over to Wausau and back up again, roughly. But it includes a lot of rivers and state forest park land.
Well, yeah, there's I list 23 different properties in section, and it's basically all the northern state forests, the state parks, and recreation areas. Quite a few of them are classified as scenic water flowage areas. So very interesting area, including the Northern Highlands American Legion State Forest, which of course is our largest state property, way over 220,000 acres. And it goes all the way up to Lake Superior, the Apostle Islands, where they'll find Big Bay State Park on a remote, not remote, but it's a difficult area to get to. You have to get a ferry to get over to Big Bay. And includes a lot of the river properties, Brule, Flambeau, Peshtigo, Willow, Menominee, and the upper Wisconsin rivers. So really an interesting part of the state. And I know you said you had Matt Denzo on, and he's manager at one of my favorite parks. What I'm asked is one of my favorite parks, Interstate, always comes to mind because I've been there many times and still enjoy going there.
Yeah, it is a beautiful park. Matthew, and you're currently, as Jim was saying, you're currently the property manager for Interstate State Park. And this park has really got an interesting history.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, we're the oldest state park in the state. You know, we say we're the oldest. We're not technically the first because there was another state park that was established by the state of Wisconsin before us in about 1878. In the northern part of Wisconsin, they called it the state park. However, nothing really happened with it and eventually was sold off. But thanks to local community involvement from individuals such as Henry Baker from St. Croix Falls, and there was another movement in the Minnesota side, Interstate Park became Wisconsin's first state park in 1900. So we're very excited to be celebrating our 125th anniversary this year, along with the entire Wisconsin state park system.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful park. It really is, and it includes land in Wisconsin and Minnesota on the sides of the St. Croix River. How do the two states collaborate or take care of the property?
I mean, there's been lots of ebbs and flows with that throughout the history of Interstate Park. At the beginning, there was a little bit more collaboration because things were coming online a little bit. At one point in time, there was even reciprocity with park stickers between the two states. So Minnesota park pass could be honored in Wisconsin. However, a lot of that just with changes in funding, popularity of different parks, what have you, that's all kind of fallen by the wayside. And we really operate as two separate state parks at this point in time.
Yeah. How different is the park from one side of the river to the other?
Well, I mean, the Wisconsin side's the best side. I mean, we're
Yeah.
the bigger, better side. We're 1,300 acres. We have over 82 campsites. We have a wonderful swimming beach. We have multiple CCC buildings. Not to talk us up more, but I mean, the Minnesota side, it's a lot smaller, and that's more of a function of the Highway 8 that runs right by it, and just the train that's there. But like I always say, we're the bigger, better side.
Jim, Interstate State Park is the western end of the Ice Age National Scenic Trail. What does that spot mean for hikers of all portions of the 1,200-mile Ice Age Trail?
Well, yeah, you're right. That's either the beginning or the end of the trail, depending on where you start. If you start in Potawatomi State Park in Door County, you've got a 1,200-mile hike to get to to interstate, or vice versa. But it's definitely a beautiful place to start your trail, and I can't think of a better place to do it than that.
Yeah, and Matthew, Jim describes in his book the Interstate Ice Age Interpretive Center as one of the finest nature centers in the state. What does the Interstate State Park have to offer paddlers?
So, what we offer is access to really uninhibited of the lower sections of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. To the north, you have very nice sections of the St. Croix and Namakagon. However, once you hit St. Croix Falls, then you have a very massive hydroelectric dam. So what we have is what a lot of people experience is they launch off of our boat launch, and there's a nice 7-mile stretch of St. Croix River that they can paddle down and then take out at the Osceola landing, and just experience the nice quiet that we have on this stretch of river, and then also experience the two dells of the St. Croix. So interstate parks, both the Minnesota, Wisconsin side, protect the upper dells. There's also a lower dells that's down the river about 2.5 to 3 miles that people can experience and enjoy.
Let's turn to Governor Knowles State Forest. Matthew, you also manage. It's the longest state forest in the state, I believe, Governor Knowles State Forest. It stretches, isn't it over 50 miles?
Yeah, approximately 55 miles or so.
And it's along the east band of the St. Croix River.
Correct. So it runs all the way from about Danbury up in Burnett County, all the way through Burnett County into northwestern Polk County.
Yeah. Jim, what's the difference between a state forest and a state park?
It used to be size-wise, and the idea of using it for commercial use for timber and so on. That changed over the years. Sometimes it was considered a state forest depending on what funding was available. That's how Point Beach State Forest became a forest instead of a park. And it's a heavily forested area, and I'm sure they do have forestry going on in that area. But anyway, that's how it started anyway.
And Matthew, the forest itself is co-managed by the DNR and the National Park Service as part of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. How does that joint management work day to day?
With the Scenic Riverway, basically, the National Park Service owns approximately 400 feet of shoreline. So right from the shoreline in, and then it meets a lot of Governor Knowles State Forest along the road. That way, that's not an area where I'm necessarily in because I'm more recreation, but forestry does have a lot of interaction with the National Park Service about working on resource management in a cooperative way.
Yeah. Could you describe, in your mind, what are the highlights of the forest?
So I would say you have the Brant Pines Recreational Trail area. We also have a long linear trail system that goes a fair amount of the distance, the length of the forest for hiking. And along those, we have 9 backpack hikes. campsites. For those individuals that are looking for that little bit out there of an adventure, those are perfect opportunities for them. And then in the southern part of the forest, that's where we have our equestrian trail system. We have our equestrian campground down there. We have approximately 35 to 40 miles of equestrian trails, providing excellent opportunities for people who want to get to a different part of the state and ride one of their horses.
And the park obviously is named after Governor Warren Knowles. Jim, do you want to talk a little about Governor Warren Knowles?
Oh, sure. Yeah, he was a really a lifelong person and legislator and governor who really protected natural resources. And he was one that actually went out and enjoyed it too. He loved going to this area fishing and really the whole state, but especially northern Wisconsin and northwestern Wisconsin. So definitely that's why they called it Governor Knowles, I'm sure.
Yeah, Knowles, and the Knowles Nelson, of course, Gaylord Nelson, Senator Gaylord Nelson, another environmentalist. I guess that's why we have Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund bearing their names.
If you like sand dune or sand cliff, I should say, sandstone cliffs. If you go there, Sand Rock Cliffs Trail, it's 5 miles long, but you don't have to take the whole thing. And it's beautiful bluffs right along the St. Croix River. And it's just a excellent place to take photography or just to enjoy being all by yourself. It's not heavily used at all.
And it was designated as a national scenic trail or riverway. What does it mean for an area to be designated as such, national scenic?
Sure. So basically, with that designation, it really signifies the quality of the waterway itself, whether it's for recreation or whether it's more kind of a wild and scenic river. So it's more on the wild side. With the St. Croix, it still has a fair amount of development, but you still get that high quality feeling of enjoying the scenery, having that recreation there. You have great water quality. The St. Croix River houses many, many, many endangered species of mussels, especially within the stretch right along interstate. And it's a high quality fishery. And the St. Croix River has many, many opportunities for people to recreate on the St. Croix and to enjoy what we have to offer on the water.
Yeah, and it was, as we were saying, 55 miles along the St. Croix River. So that's a quite a stretch and opportunity for people. I want to turn our attention to the nearby. It's much smaller, Straight Lake State Park, and I think it's a different kind of park. I think it's about 2,000 acres, if I'm not mistaken, Matthew. But it's designated as a quiet area. Explain that.
Yeah. So Straight Lake is designed to be a property for individuals who want to go out and just reconnect with nature. It's not a property that has modern camping hookups for people with RVs. It's not a property that has motorized lakes. It's a property where you can go out, enjoy your time there, and just kind of reconnect with nature. It's specifically designed to be low use.
And in terms of boating and so forth?
So both of our lakes that we have Straight Lake and Rainbow Lake. They're both wild untouched lakes. So there's no development on either one of those, and they are both non-motorized. The access, you have to carry it in. So it provides that experience. Whether you want to carry in a kayak or a canoe, it's completely up to you. Rainbow Lake's going to be a lot smaller. It's about 8 acres in total, but that just gets stocked every year with brown trout. Otherwise, Straight Lake, it's about 120 acres. It gives you a very nice feel of being on that lake with nothing else going on, that you're out in the middle of nowhere and giving you that feeling.
Is that lake stocked as well?
Straight Lake is not stocked. It has panfish in there, northern and bass.
So still, I think when you're hauling your boat, your canoe in or your kayak in, there's probably some pretty good fishing.
Definitely, especially northern. There's a lot of stick northern that are in there, so you'll definitely get some action.
Our guests today, Jim Buckholtz and Matthew Densau. Matthew is the DNR property manager for Interstate State Parks, Straight Lake State Park, and Governor Knowles State Forest. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Great to have you with us on WPR News. Larry Mealer here talking about state parks, forest, and recreation areas in northern Wisconsin. A couple of guests for you. Jim Buchholz, he's the author of the book, a great book, Wisconsin State Parks, Forests, and Recreation Areas, a Ranger's Guide. Also with us today, Matthew Densau. Matthew is a DNR property manager for Interstate State Park, Straight Lake State Park, and Governor Knowles State Forest. The other thing I wanted to bring up was you mentioned horse trails.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on there? People can bring their horses?
Yes. So at Governor Knowles, we have an equestrian campground. It has 39 sites that are available for reservation. And then we also have a day use area right there as well. And we have approximately 35 to 45 miles of equestrian trail. And I say that little range in there because we're kind of redoing our maps. So we want to make sure to give people an accurate number on that. And it goes through a whole bunch of different areas of the forest itself. I would say the Riverview Trail is the most popular. Just because it takes you right along the Trade River. So you have fantastic views of the Trade River as it meanders through the forest there. And we also it has some interesting terrain in that area. We actually had this past winter, some of the hillside kind of slough off. And that's just due to the terrain that we have there where basically water can't flow all the way through, so then it goes out sideways halfway out the hill, and it makes this amazing step pattern on the hillside. So it's very neat to see that way.
Yeah, I would think so. So does it get a lot of use?
Most of the time it gets use more in the early parts of the year and the fall time of the year. Bugs and horses aren't necessarily the best thing that works together, especially with horse riders. So middle of summertime, we generally don't have as much then.
Yeah, that would definitely make sense. And are there trails for motorized anywhere in the parks that you manage?
No, not for motorized in a normal sense. Governor Knowles does have snowmobile trails that run through it along with interstate. We do have a section that way. Most of our properties, since we're in northwestern Wisconsin, very rural, a lot of the townships allow ATV, UTV use on the roadways and things. And the Polk County has a system that kind of attracts a lot of the users that way, but not specifically on our properties.
Yeah. For you, and in your mind, you've got 3 parks here. What are the biggest challenges for you?
Challenges, I mean, like I kind of mentioned earlier, every day is a new day. You never know what's going to happen. Infrastructure is always a big thing, especially at interstate. We are the oldest state park property, which also means we also have a fair amount of old infrastructure as well. And then just, maintenance. There's always new things that come up, keeping up our level of customer service that we want to have for our visitors. Things change on a daily basis. Summertime hiring, it's very important. And the vast majority of the time we get great candidates, but it's also something that changes every year. But that's part of the joy of the job. It's finding solutions to this stuff and providing the best state park experience that we can offer.
Yeah. Jim Buchholz, you kind of mentioned in passing, but other parks or areas that are close by the interstate, the Straight Lake, and the Governor Knowles State Forest, aside from Amnacan Falls and Pattison and Brule River, which we'll be talking about, but what are some other things that people can see?
Well, really not that far. Just south of interstate is Willow River State Park. Again, very close to the Minneapolis St. Paul area, so that is one of the heaviest used, I think, state parks by our Minnesota friends because it's right on the border there. And then south of there is the Kinnickinnick State Park, which is another park, a kind of unusual park in that there's no traditional camping there, but there's an area you can pull up with your boat and camp overnight in your boat. So very unusual thing there. And so those two in the south are really pretty close to interstate as well. Both definitely wonderful to see. Willow River has got some beautiful waterfall areas and its own lake, backed up lake, man-made lake, which is great. Just a wonderful beach there and just a great place to camp. I've been there many times and never been disappointed there.
And joining now is Gervis Thompson. Gervis is DNR property manager for Amnacan Falls State Park, Pattison State Park, and the Brule River State Forest. Gervis, thanks for joining in.
Good morning, Larry. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
If you look at Amnacan Falls and Pattison, both of those locations are known for their waterfalls. Talk about them.
I'm very lucky to be in a position where I oversee these properties that has the state's tallest waterfall, as well as several other waterfalls. So at Pattison State Park, obviously a lot of people know we have the state's tallest waterfall, Big Manitou Falls, and also a smaller one, Little Manitou Falls. And Amnacan has a series of waterfalls, so there are a lot of people throughout the year that want to stop and visit and check out the falls.
Yeah, I've checked them out many a time. They're absolutely beautiful. And Jim, let me turn to you for a minute. According to your book, Pattison Falls State Park was the result of a secret land deal.
It sure was. That's one of my favorite stories, I think, about any state park. But there was a guy, Martin Pattison, so you get an idea why it's named after him. But his name was Martin, and he moved to that area in 1879, and he made a lot of money. He did a lumber business there and iron ore mining, so he was a very wealthy guy. He built this mansion, which is in the nearby community, which is open to the public, I guess, even today. But anyway, he learned that they were going to build a hydroelectric dam on the Black River. The Black River is the river that goes through over two waterfalls and goes out. And he found out they were going to dam that, and it was going to basically ruin the beautiful scenery and the waterfalls there. So, yeah, he secretly purchased 660 acres along the river. And I suppose everybody thought he was going to do some more logging, but instead he donated it to the state to develop a new state park back in 1920. I just think that's a great secret way of getting a state park. But we owe Pattison, and he definitely deserves to be named as part of the park name.
Well, I would certainly agree with that. Oh, man. Gervis, what can visitors see and learn at the Gitchigumi Nature Center at Pattison State Park?
Sure. Well, the Gitchigumi Nature Center has got a little bit of the history of the park in it. There'll be some displays of the CCC camp that was there, Camp Pattison, back in the mid to late 1930s to early 1940. There is some wildlife exhibits in there, some geologic exhibits. It's not a big nature center, but people, especially during the summertime when the park is busy, they like stopping in there and just checking the nature center out.
Yeah. I was trying to think of the length of the Big Manitou Falls. It's
165-foot waterfall.
165 foot.
Yes. So that's the tallest waterfall in Wisconsin and the fourth tallest east of the Rocky Mountains. At Amnacan Falls, which are smaller waterfalls, the Amnacan River that flows through the park, in the summertime, people are welcome to swim in the river and the pools of the falls, and that's a pretty popular attraction.
Yeah. But 165 feet, that's a pretty good drop.
Yeah, it's well worth, if anyone's up in this area, it is sure well worth stop just to kind of stand back. And we have viewing platforms on both sides of the gorge there, so you can get up close to the falls, and then on the south side you got more of the top to bottom view of that big waterfall.
Yeah, and hiking trails. There are some nice. Let's take Pattison. There are some nice hiking trails there in Pattison.
Yes, yep. We offer, oh, there's probably close to 5 miles of hiking trails. But I offer people offer them if they want to hike between Big and Little Manitou Falls. There's a nice 3 mile round trip hike that people really seem to enjoy. So we certainly recommend that.
Yeah, Jim, what do you like about uh, Amnacan Falls State Park?
Amnacan is, well, as you mentioned, being able to go, and these are very small waterfalls, most of them. There's one or two very large ones, but there's some smaller ones that are really great. Even if you have kids, I brought my kids there when they were little, and just to play in the little waterfalls and so on. And there's so many of them. And the upper falls go over large basalt rock, and the lower ones really go over sandstone rocks and real bright red sandstone in areas. And it's just a fun place to go. And it's not very deep, though the river is not deep in most places. There are some deeper pools at the bottom of some of the waterfalls, but for the most part they're shallow and just fun to go in the place in summertime, wade in there. It's just a great place to go. And there's not a lot of trails there, but they're short, but they're really neat to see. The best one I would say would be to go to the waterfalls trail, where you get a chance to see the different waterfalls, and the little bridges that go back and forth to see them, and especially one called the Snake Pit Falls. And that has to do with the fault that he mentioned about the fault and the crack in the earth. And you look down into the Snake Pit Falls. It's Snake Pit Falls, and I'm not sure why they call it that, but it's pretty neat. I mean, it's a roaring stretch straight down in this big gorge, and it's pretty neat to see.
It is. You call Amnacan Falls, or you describe it in your book as a one of a kind natural water park.
Definitely a place to go to get cool off on a hot summer day.
Describe the Brill River State Forest for us.
It's a wonderful property, Larry. Lots of history. It's about a 47,000 acre state forest. It contains the entire length of the famous Bois Brule River, 44-mile length. So that's obviously the number one attraction. It's called the River of Presidents, and it's very well known for providing great fisheries, also for recreation with canoeing and kayaking certain times of the year. From a management standpoint, we have a couple of campgrounds that are uh, in the state forest. We have hiking trails. We have a lot of canoe landings, fishermen parking lots, a great trail system, after hours ski trail system just outside of Brule. So a lot of opportunities throughout the year for people to recreate in the forest.
Yeah. Somebody else was asking about fish. What do you fish for in the Brule?
Well, again, the Brule, and a lot of people find this confusing when you tell them that the river flows north, but so the Brule River flows into Lake Superior, flows north. But we get runs of steelhead, runs of coho salmon, some Chinook salmon, and some runs of lake brown trout. There are also resident trout that spend their entire life in the river, brook brown and rainbow trout that you can fish for as well. But it's a trout and salmon fishery.
Yeah, I've done a little rainbow and brookie fishing there, and had some luck.
Yeah.
Surprisingly enough. Oh man! So, and how do people usually fish that river? Fly
Depending
fishing?
on the Yeah, depending on the time of the year. I mean, there are a lot of fly fishermen, and when the water's cold in the spring, once trout season opens up, a lot of them will be, throwing spawn bags or yarn flies and certain flies throughout the year. And then as the water kind of warms up, a lot of people will start fishing with spinning gear and throwing some MEP spinners or some spoons. But it's and with all the fishermen parking lots that we have throughout the state forest, there's plenty of opportunity to try different sections of the river. Or if you have a canoe, you can float certain sections and fish from your canoe as well.
And if you're into hiking, I mean, there's mile after mile. Talk about the hiking system.
Sure. So again, yeah, in the Brule River State Forest, there's a couple of trails that the DNR management manages. The Stony Hill Trail is close to the Brule River Ranger Station. We have the old Bayfield Trail, which is just north of Brule off of Cleveland Road. And also there's a good portion of the North Country Trail that goes through the Brule River State Forest. So there's lots of hiking opportunities on the North Country Trail, as well as Pattison State Park. Part of the North Country Trail goes through Pattison as well.
Tom in Madison wonders, why are there so few non-reservable campsites in Wisconsin state parks? Most are now first come, first served, the non-reservable. Jim, do you have a comment on it? Or Gervis, do you have a comment?
Well, and I think some of that stems from, and maybe Jim can add. I think during our COVID, we used to have some first come, first served non-reservable sites, but the park system moved to just making all sites reservable. So now all campsites in all the state parks are now reservable. So we don't have any more first come, first served campsites.
But one thing that a lot of people don't know about that I think I wanted to mention was it's called the Notify Me alert. So if you go on the Wisconsin Going to Camp, it's called wisconsingoingtocamp.com, and you can either go there directly or you can go to the state park and it'll give you an app to get to that place as well. But anyway, if the time or the date that you want to go or the site isn't available, you can put in your preferred location, dates, equipment, party size, and even recently now they added a filter so you can put in things like I want electric or don't want electric. And then the Notify Me button, which is kind of in the upper right-hand corner on that screen, you just press that and it will watch for those things. A lot of people make reservations. Most people know you can make reservations 11 months in advance. So because it's so far in advance, things come up. People get, weddings or, health problems or whatever. So there's lots of cancellations. And this system, Notify Me, will alert you to that you have a site that's available. So I really encourage people to use that system and keep trying to get in.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gervis, in the meantime, thank you so much for being with us and for the work you do. Much appreciated.
Well, thank you, Larry. It was a pleasure being on your show, and I just hope and encourage all your listeners to come out and visit your state parks and state forests this year.
Gervis Thompson, DNR Property Manager for Amnican Falls State Park, Pattison State Park, and Brule River State Forest. Lots of water there. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Great to have you with us on WPR News. Larry Mealer here. We're talking today about our state parks, forest, and recreation areas in Door County and southeast Wisconsin. Eric Hyde is a property supervisor for Peninsula State Park, Newport State Park, and Rock Island State Park. Eric, thank you for joining in.
Yeah. Hey, Larry. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
One of the parks I spend a lot of time at is Peninsula State Park. We've talked previously, Interstate Park was the first park in 1900. Peninsula State Park in Door County was the second state park. It was established in 1919. Why was that area developed as a state park maybe so early in our state history?
Oh, yeah, it sure has been. And it was on the list of established state parks, along with several other ones, Wyalusing State Park, which was called Nelson Dewey at one time, and Wisconsin Dells, which unfortunately never did become a state park, but it is a recreation area. Quite a few acres have been purchased there in the last couple decades, but certainly Peninsula, most people know it. Many people have been there. definitely one of the most popular state parks. That, along with Devil's Lake, is certainly the most popular of the state parks in Wisconsin.
Yeah. The maybe give a little history. Who lived in that area that would become Peninsula State Park?
Oh, there were several archaeological studies that have been done there over the years. So lots way back near the end of the Ice Age, actually, there were people there hunting and fishing. And it's always been a place that really has been used by Native Americans, First People. Archaeological excavations, I know they did at Nicolay Bay, which is the swimming area and the camp area and the park area. And they found woodland and I think Oneida people who lived in villages there. And they think I think they have it back to BC, 400 BC, and up until 1300 AD, there were still people living there in small settlements.
Boy. Eric, you're the supervisor of Peninsula State Park and two other state parks. How'd you, this is kind of a plum assignment, it would be in my mind at least. How did you land there?
Yeah, so I'm actually, I was new to the DNR. I'd previously spent about 10 years working for Washington County as a land conservation technician, and then eventually moved into the park system, and yeah, saw this opening, and yeah, couldn't be more thankful for the opportunity to work at three of the most beautiful state parks we have here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's the third, if by numbers, most popular state park. I think we had, what 1.1 million visitors last year?
Last year we actually had a little over 1.3 million visitors.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What challenges come with managing a park that attracts so many people?
Yeah, so Door County alone offers a few issues with not having a lot of employee housing. It's not a very big population. I think the whole population of Door County is about 30,000, with a lot of it being in Sturgeon Bay, and there's a big tourist industry up here. So, there's plenty of opportunities for summer employment for a lot of the local high school, college age kids. So we generally hire throughout the state, try to get state employees first, but then even, we have to normally bring on a few out of state employees just to meet that requirement. So we're fortunate to have housing available here, but Peninsula State Park itself, I don't think a lot of people realize we have our own, waste treatment plant that's similar to, other towns and municipalities, smaller municipalities. So getting that, we have, over 15, 16 bathroom flush facilities. So getting that all turned down, our water system, miles of utilities. So we're pretty much a small town here. So, working with our visitors, keeping them educated, follow rules, respect the wildlife, try to keep things clean, and then just maintaining an area that gets that much love each year. There's always, different issues going on. So, yeah, but really it's, when we get into summer months, we have over, 250,000 people in the month of July coming most years alone. So a lot of folks.
And quite a few people play that 18-hole golf course. The park has its own 18-hole golf course. That's unique, isn't it, in the state park system?
Yep. Yeah, we're the only state park. They actually just celebrated their 100th anniversary of having a 9-hole layout last year in 2024, and it's a beautiful course. You have beautiful views of the harbor there in Ephraim, and it's just a really interesting course.
Jim, you say that Peninsula State Park is it's often described as the most scenic park in Wisconsin, and why do you say that?
Well, its name alone, Peninsula, the whole park is a giant peninsula that extends into the Green Bay area, Green Bay watershed. And it rises up on several cliff areas, limestone cliffs that raise 100 and some feet above the water level. And these areas, although they were touched by the glaciers during the glacier period, they resisted them. So they resisted that, and they resisted a lot of the elevations of the Lake Michigan, the ancient different named waters that rose like 50 feet or more higher than they are today. So we've got beautiful areas like the caves that were washed out by the waves of the other lakes. And just the views from atop those bluff areas of the beautiful Green Bay area, just gorgeous views, but by far, I think one of the most beautiful sceneries. And I think people that have visited Peninsula, certainly in the spring when the flowers are blooming, and again in the fall, it's just a beautiful colorama of color there. And there's quite a few roads in the park. It's just not one road in and one road out. There's several roads, and some of them go up to the top of the bluffs, so you don't have to climb these bluffs if you don't want to. You can go up to the bluffs by vehicle and take a look over Nicolay Bay and the area, or you can go up the 60-foot observation tower, which is pretty new. So maybe Eric could fill you in more about that observation tower, which has really become a go-see thing at Peninsula within the last couple of years.
Yeah, Eric, can you talk about that? It is really, really cool.
Yeah, so this is actually the third version of Eagle Tower. So the first one was built in 1914, shortly after Peninsula became a park in 1909. Didn't really use the right lumber, so that didn't last. Only lasted until 1932, and they built another one, and that's the one that stood into the 2000s. And the most recent one that opened in 2021. So, like Jim said, it's about 60 feet high, but it sits on about a 190-foot bluff overlooking Green Bay. So it's really neat, and it also includes a 850-foot accessible ramp. So it's been a beautiful thing to have here, but that's also added a lot more visitors up here. So we're working on what we can do to improve parking there, but it's just a testament to the beautiful views we have here in the park.
Yeah, I was thinking as we were talking, I think I've spent at least 3 months at Peninsula State Park at one point or another. I'm thinking about my daughter, Emily, who's 21 years old now. I think we started taking her there when she was 2. So and we spent a lot of time at Nicolay Bay Beach. Eric, do you want to talk about that? It's probably the most I think it is the most popular beach within the park.
Yeah, so the Nicolay Beach is a beautiful area. Going back to the indigenous people that lived here, that was kind of their main area too. So it's been a place loved by humans for thousands of years. Just beautiful views of Horseshoe Island there, beach. We have a great concessionaire there that we always encourage folks to support them, because all of our partners donate money back to the State of Our Friends group. But the beach there, volleyball courts, we've got food trucks there now. So just a really nice family-friendly area, pretty large area, nice sandy beach. So it's a great place to check out and visit.
Newport State Park. You're the Natural Resources Property Supervisor for this Northern Door County unit. It's a really interesting park, and I always make it a point to visit it when I'm in Door County.
Yeah, Newport's definitely a little bit different than Peninsula State Park for sure. I think last year attendance was like around 150,000, and it's just a very large park. There's 11 miles of shoreline there. It's the only wilderness designated state park in the Wisconsin State Park System, and it's also the only dark sky designated state park in Wisconsin, and one of the few in the Midwest. So just really special place there, being kind of away from some of the main busy areas in Door County, and then having the lake there, it's just incredibly dark. So that's something our naturalist, Beth Bartoli, worked to get us that designation. It's something we have to take annual light readings to make sure we keep that designation. So, we work with a lot of our neighbors to try to keep the dark skies there, because it's been such a big attendance area for people to go out there and check out the Milky Way, with the naked eye. It's just,
It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And Jim, you wrote in your book that there was some local opposition to the creation of Newport State Park. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's true. The state recognized early on in the 1940s they tried to purchase that property. It kind of was an abandoned community that was there for quite a few years, and it kind of went into a ghost town, you might say, and kind of vacant land, and the state wanted to purchase the property, but the local citizens were really against it. They thought they would be overrun by tourists and campers, and maybe they were watching Peninsula, not sure. But so they did finally approve later on. It took a couple decades, 20 years later, they finally got approval from the local citizens to create a state park there, but it had to be a low-impact wilderness state parks, and that's became the first wilderness state park that the state ever came up with, and it still is, and it's still a beautiful place to go, and still very quiet, and all the sites are walk-in sites there. So, but just a beautiful place to just go for the day and hike, even if you're not camping. We enjoy going up there, once a year, probably, for sure. We head up that way ourselves.
Yeah, I always like the trails. There's some great ones in there that really, really, really nice. Eric, maybe describe the trails that you've got.
Yeah, so we've got some really neat ones there. Lynn Point is a very popular one. That's from kind of our main parking area down by the beach, but it goes out to a little kind of rocky point where you've got some small little cliffs, and yeah, just a really interesting trail. And then going north farther, northern part of the park, there's some, there's Europe Bay, or Europe Lake is over there, and that's actually a lake that used to be bay connected to the lake, but then when the lake levels changed, it got landlocked in there. So beautiful views of that lake. And then there's also, old sand dunes that you're kind of going over, and just, not too many places you can go for a mile-long walk on the beach in Wisconsin, but Newport, even just hiking the beach, I always tell visitors to check that out just because it's such a beautiful stroll.
I wanted to get Rock Island State Park in as well. This is the northernmost state park that you supervise, and it's a little different way to get there.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, you got to take a couple ferries. You got to take the car ferry from Northport over to Washington Island, drive across Washington Island, and then hop on the car fee, which is a passenger-only ferry that goes from Washington Island to Rock Island. So it's definitely a little bit more of a trip to get there, but the rewards of going there are just amazing. We have 40 walk-in campsites, a handful of backpacking sites, and just, yeah, once you get on island time up there on Rock Island, I mean, once the last ferry leaves at 4:00, you're stuck there. So there's not much of a reason to keep track of time. Just enjoy
the time, and neither motor vehicles or even bicycles, I don't think, are allowed there.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, just all walking trails. So we got obviously a little bit of equipment there for our staff to maintain it, but otherwise, yeah, it's only way to get around is on foot there. Yeah, Rock Island's definitely a cool place to check out. I always call it a kind of a conglomerate of all the Door County state parks. You've got the beautiful bluffs and the lighthouse on the west side, and then the Cuesta, the east side of the escarpment. You've got really nice sandy beaches, these big historic buildings. It's actually, other than, I think, Aslan State Park, it's the only other state park that has a National Historic Landmark designation by the National Park Service on it, with its rich indigenous history there. So,
well, our guests today, Jim Buchholz and Eric Hyde, we're talking with them about the state parks, zeroed in a bit on Peninsula State Park and Rock Island State Park, and also another one of my favorites, Newport State Park. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Larry Mealer here as we take a look at our Wisconsin state parks, forests, and recreation areas. And happy to introduce you to Molly McKay, Property Supervisor for Kohler André State Park and Harrington Beach State Park. And Molly McKay, welcome. Thanks for taking time to be with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you took this job over, I think, last June. You have served as property manager for Kohler André State Park. It's probably best known for its beachfront and sand dunes. I wonder how much do the wind and the waves alter the landscape there?
Oh, it's amazing how much the lake affects the landscape. And excuse me, I can go out one day and then come back a few days later, and things change so quickly. The lake is a really powerful thing.
So it moves. So it moves the landscape around a little bit.
Yeah, it moves the sand. And so we had really high waves, high lake levels in 2019 and 2020. They were extremely high. And since then, all of the dunes that had been washed away are starting to rebuild. And so you get to actually go out and see how much growth has happened, you know, after just a few months. And particularly in the winter, because in the winter months, the wind is coming more from the south. And so it moves a lot of that sand across the dunes and does a lot of building.
Yeah, it's really cool. Jim, who was talk about who the park was named after?
Well, it was named after actually two people, named after Terry Andre. He was an industrialist, business owner from Milwaukee, and he had a home along the beach there. That's how it all got started. When he passed away in 1927, his wife, Elsbeth Andre, donated his property to the state to become a state park. At that time, it was 120 acres, and of course, the park has since grown to, I think, 2,000 acres now. But that was the start of it. And later on in the 1960s, the Kohler Company donated land as well on the northern part of what is now Kohler-Andre State Park, and that was dedicated to John Michael Kohler, who was the founder of the Kohler Company, which I think pretty much everybody knows what they produce. And that's how it got its name. So for short, it's a long name, John Michael Kohler Terry Andre State Park. They're all so it's just kind of it's been changed over the years to just be called Kohler Andre State Park.
Yeah, interesting background there. Molly, the trails. There's some cool trails. Describe the trails located within the park.
Sure. So we have some pretty diverse trails. The one that we're most well known for is the Dunes Cordwalk. And that's a trail that goes right through the center of the Kohler Dunes State Natural Area. And it's a plank trail to help protect the dunes because walking on the sand itself is pretty tricky. It's about 2 miles one way. And it has little offshoots that bring you down to the lake so you can make a loop that's as long as you really want it to be. People come from all over the place to see it and to take photos of it. We also have some trails that are through the woods. We have the Woodland Dunes Trail, and then we have a little piece of property that's not accessed from the main park entrance called the Black River Trails. And we also have the Ancient Shores Trail, which goes through a prairie, and that goes along the edge of an ancient lake where the lake used to be.
Yeah, and how does the there's an interurban bike trail that kind of explain that how that
Sure.
trail serves the state park.
So the route of the interurban bike trail goes through the state park. It's not a separate trail, it's a bike lane on our roads, but you can access the interurban trail by heading through the park. So we get quite a bit of bike traffic heading that way.
And let's talk campsites for a minute as well. How in demand are the campsites there?
Oh my gosh. We get calls all the time of people saying, "I think there's something wrong with your reservation service because it looks like every single weekend is booked all summer." And I have to say, I'm really sorry to tell you that that's actually true. They are all full every weekend, all summer.
Molly, I want to go back to the friends groups for just a minute because you do have an active Friends of Kohler Andre State Park. And the Nature Center itself is staffed in part by volunteer hosts.
Yeah, it's actually entirely staffed by volunteer hosts. And so we actually have Nature Center hosts all summer long, and we're open every single day from May through October. And so we have people lined up to work there all summer long. And I recently looked at how many hours our volunteers put in last year, and they essentially triple our staff time just by volunteer time because we have so many volunteers working for us. It's amazing. We couldn't do it without them.
I wanted to turn our attention as well to Harrington Beach State Park. That's just south of Kohler Andre. It's another state park on Lake Michigan that you oversee. Can you describe the park?
Sure. So Harrington Beach State Park is got a little over a mile of Lake Michigan shoreline. And so in some ways it's similar to Kohler Andre because we've got some really beautiful beach, but it is different. We don't have the big dune complexes and we have more cedar and ash swamp. But it's got 70 campsites. We have miles of trail. We've got something that's really unique is we actually have an observatory, and the Northern Cross Science Foundation takes care of that, and they have special astronomy events going on all throughout the summer.
And there's no motor vehicle traffic, directly through the park, is there?
No, it's a pretty unique situation. It was named actually after C.L. Harrington, who was the first superintendent of state parks and forests. He was superintendent from 1923 until 1950. But a big part of the park, of course, is the lake and the mile of beautiful beachfront, which is huge. The beach areas is really wide and beautiful. So there were a lot of people there just last weekend. But some people don't know, just inland, a short area is a quarry area, and that was a 26-acre quarry that was used for removing limestone back in the day, and beginning way back in the 1800s way into the 1900s. And when it was abandoned, it filled up with water. So now it's a beautiful inland lake. It's crystal clear water, 45 feet deep. And there's a beautiful trail that goes around it. It's called Quarry Lake Trail. So if you're enjoying the beach and you want a little break, go inland. It's an interesting trail. It's got interpretive signs along the way. And one of the things I find interesting along that trail is the exposed limestone. And if you look carefully, there's fossils embedded in that limestone, and there's also scrape marks that were left by the glacial ice that moved through that area over 12,000 years ago. And you can see the exact direction that the glacier moved, which is normally northeast in our area.
And Jim, I want to go back to the sort of the background or history. In your book, you said that Harrington Beach State Park was a lesser-known day-use property for over 40 years until it became really popular.
Right. It kind of got discovered, you might say. It was just a day-use park, and even though it was so close to the Milwaukee area, it's in Ozaukee County, so just north of Milwaukee a little ways. I think what really changed that was when we decided to put a campground there. And that was, I can't remember the exact date that happened, but in the 90s, I believe it was, or early 2000s. And that made a big difference. All of a sudden, we had a campground, a large campground, and it got to be known well after that. And, people discovered things like the Quarry Trail and the big beach that's there. And wow, it surely has changed from a little-known park to one of the more popular state parks, and so accessible because it's so close to the big metropolitan areas of the state.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the River Edge Nature Center is nearby. What do visitors find there?
River Edge, yeah, that's a beautiful place. It's along the Milwaukee River, and I believe it's about 200-some acres, and they have a nature center there and some beautiful trails. They do a lot with school groups and youngsters, and on site they actually have an area where the state is raising lake sturgeon to be reintroduced into Lake Michigan. And there are times when they're open that you can go and watch and see how they do that. Tanks full of baby lake sturgeon, which is kind of neat to see. Then they have release days where they release them either into the Milwaukee River. You can watch that, or some I know they bring right to the Milwaukee shoreline and release them, like at Lakeshore State Park in downtown Milwaukee. They have a release there as well. So, but lots of hiking trails and lots of neat things to do at River Edge. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I just go back to Kohler Andre for a minute, because the Sanderling Nature Center, you had a little note in there about the naming of why it's named that.
Yeah, the Sanderling Nature Center. It's amazing that people go to Kohler Andre for years, and even the local people go to the beach and enjoy the park. And then you tell them, there's a nature center here, and they say, what? But it was developed in 1972. It's a beautiful facility. It's got a 99-seat auditorium where they have programs and show movies and all kinds of neat things, as Molly mentioned. But I really don't know who named it. I can't tell you that, but it's named after the sanderling, which is a little sandpiper. If you go to the beach, oftentimes you'll see these little sandpipers running along the shoreline, picking around, eating little things in the surf. And those are sanderlings. They migrate through the area to go up north. They do their nesting farther north. But there are sanderlings that do not nest. There's some of them, the younger ones, and they'll be there all summer long. And that's what they named the Nature Center after.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the Bobolink Trail actually is a great place. It's a prairie trail at Harrington, and it's something that's being managed by wildlife. So we are really working on maintaining the quality for habitat.
That's wonderful. Well, Beth emailed to say they love Wisconsin State Park. Since retiring in 2019, Beth said they have joined a group of friends on a quest to camp in each state park, and they're having a great time pursuing that goal. Beth wanted to specifically rave about the bike trail from Point Beach State Park to Two Rivers and on to Manitowoc. Always lots to see. I mean, for you, Molly? What's the joy of working in a park, at the two parks that you work at?
I love Lake Michigan, and it's just such an amazing thing to be working in such close proximity to it and seeing all of its moods and the way it changes things and affects everything.
Yeah, the moods reminded me of a piece that, Jim, that you had. Sometimes the mood isn't good, and sometimes problems occur. And there was the steamship Niagara years ago that was lost. I think 60 people lost their lives.
Yeah, that was right off Sheboygan, and actually there's a good interpretive display actually at Harrington Beach about that, and the actual anchor from that steamship was there. But unfortunately, it caught fire, and quite a few lives were lost. It's one of the more tragic. These were immigrants from Holland, primarily heading south to the Ozaki area, which is immigrants from the mostly Holland area. But tragic tale, and there's been books written about it even. But lots of loss of life on that one. But that's, when you look at the shipwrecks along Lake Michigan, there's literally hundreds and up to thousands of shipwrecks. There's actually a part of a wooden ship at Kohler Andre State Park. Part of it's outside. You can look at it. Inside, there's a whole display about that particular ship. So if you're interested in marine history, there's some history right at Kohler Andre that you can. Both Harrington and Kohler Andre are good for that.
Thanks, Jim. And
all right.
And pick up a copy of Jim's book. It's take a look at it. It's if you're interested in the state parks at all, Wisconsin State Parks, Forests, and Recreation Areas. Brand new book. Jim Buchholz, the author. It's a ranger's guide, and it's packed with information about the 80 state parks and recreation areas that we have in the state. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News.